Hey everybody, welcome back to the Optometry Money Podcast. We're helping ODs all over the country make better and better decisions around their money, their careers, and their practices. I am your host, Evon Mendrin, certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, an independent financial planning firm just for optometrists nationwide. And we really appreciate you listening today once again. And if you are new to the podcast, really appreciate you joining us today. In today's episode, I'm going to dive into the recently passed Secure Act 2.0. And there was a lot here. And I mean, it could seem like a crazy amount of stuff packed into this law. And I'm going to try to break it down into a few sections about the core things in the law that I think almost all optometrists should be aware of. And if you want to, in addition to listening some of the stuff here, if you want to read more detail, I'll be doing a write-up for the ODs on Facebook community this week for their Wealth Advisor newsletter, which I am the editor of. And that'll be coming out this week. So check out the ODs on Facebook website to sign up for that email list if you're not subscribed. And you can check out the article there once it's live. I also did a write-up for my own newsletter as well, my own weekly newsletter. And I put a link to that newsletter in the show notes, so you can check that out too. And you can find the show notes by scrolling down in whatever app you're using or on the Education Hub on my website, optometrywealth.com. And while you're there, if you'd like to chat about how I advise ODs nationwide around the Secure Act and everything beyond, feel free to schedule a no-commitment introductory call and we can chat about whatever is on your mind financially. So with that, let's dive in. So in December, Congress passed a behemoth, just massive 4,000-page spending bill, which included this Secure Act 2.0, which for anyone in the financial planning space was long awaited. If you remember, they passed an original Secure Act back in 2019, which had a substantial impact on the way you used IRAs in estate planning. So, this essentially affected everybody because eventually someone is going to inherit your IRAs, or you may inherit someone else's. So these inheritance rules affected basically everybody in a pretty substantial way. And while this 2.0 didn't have a single part that affected everyone so massively, it made up for that lack of impact in just the super long list of stuff that it changed rules on. So I'm going to dive into some of the most important parts that optometrists need to keep in mind. And I have 3 sections here. 529 plans, we'll talk about simple IRA plan rules, and then we'll talk about 401k plan rules, right? So 3 things to sort of be aware of here. Some of the rules take effect immediately or this year, others into the future. So to help with that timing, I'll be talking about the years here, but I also included a link to download a graphic that I created that will show all the different rule changes you should at least be aware of on a timeline. So you can download that in the show notes too. So with that, let's start with 529 plans. What changed? The Secure Act 2.0 created the ability for you to transfer or roll over 529 funds to a Roth IRA federally tax-free. So this is something that starts in 2024, and 529s have been a pretty handy, pretty awesome tool for planning and saving for college costs for kids or grandkids or other family members. The money you put in, depending on which state you're in, you may get a state tax benefit. The funds, as you invest them, grow, and you don't have to pay taxes on any of that growth or earnings while it's growing. And then assuming you use the funds for qualified higher education costs, all of that growth comes out tax-free. And that's even been expanded to include trade school and up to a limit, K through 12 school costs. So they've started to expand the use of it. So they've been pretty handy tools, with one big drawback is that the uncertainty of whether your kids or family members will actually go to college. And if they don't, you're sort of limited to only a few options because it's really locked in for those education costs. So this new rule allows you to at least shield a portion of those funds from that uncertainty and to reuse it towards your own retirement if there's funds left over or if kids don't end up going to college. So You can, starting in 2024, you can roll over up to a lifetime maximum of $35,000 federally tax-free into a Roth IRA. But like all things, there's rules to follow. So let's just glance over these rules here. So number one, the 529 must have been opened and used for at least 15 years. The Roth IRA needs to be in the name of the beneficiary of the 529, not the owner, right? So if you open a 529 for your kid, you are the owner, but your kid is the beneficiary. So the Roth IRA needs to be in the same name as the beneficiary of the 529. The next thing to know is that 529 deposits within the last 5 years, plus the earnings for those deposits, cannot be moved yet into the Roth IRA, right? So there's sort of a 5-year waiting period for your deposits. And you can only transfer an amount from that 529 into a Roth IRA per year equal to the IRA contribution limit in that year, right? So as an example, in 2023, the IRA, the maximum amount you can put into an IRA is $6,500. So just in a hypothetical world where you can do it this year, you could only move up to $6,500 into that Roth IRA. And that's lowered by any amount that you actually put into the IRA as a regular contribution, right? So there's no double dipping here in terms of getting dollars into that Roth IRA. So there's some rules to keep in mind here, and this is a $35,000 lifetime limit per beneficiary. So for a $35,000 for you, it appears $35,000 for your spouse if you're married, for each kid. So that's per beneficiary. And there are still some uncertainties around, for example, what happens if you change the beneficiary. Let's say you have one 529 that's for your kid, and you change the beneficiary to yourself, which you can do, so that you can transfer the funds into your own Roth IRA. Does that restart that 15-year clock? Everything I've heard about the intent of the law seems that won't end up being the case. It won't be that difficult where you'll have to open a 529 for like every family member. But we don't know for sure, right? So that's something to keep an eye on. And it's not substantial, like $35,000. Okay, that's not a life-changing amount. But this is a way to shield some uncertainty for essentially locking in funds in that 529 account for education, and can lead to some interesting planning opportunities, especially for parents or grandparents, maybe heavily funding a 529 up front for kids or grandkids, potentially down the road, using it to transfer funds into their own Roth IRA, right? So there may be some opportunities here to use this rule to our advantage here. This may be a reason to open up a 529 account for someone and funding it early and just getting that clock started. So that may be a reason to do that. And if you're still just uncomfortable with locking in like all of your dollars into a 529 account, you could still do what I've typically felt comfortable doing, and that's splitting deposits or splitting investments into a 529 as well as a taxable investment account. Yes, you give up some tax benefit using a taxable investment account, but you make up for that with a world of flexibility, and you can build a pretty tax efficient portfolio with a taxable investment account. So that's something you can do as well. It's something to consider. But number one, starting in 2024, Secure Act 2.8 gives you the ability to transfer funds from a 529 account to a Roth IRA as long as you meet the rules. Next thing, or next category of rules to think about, are going to be rule changes specific to simple IRA plans. All right, so if you are a practice owner, probably a relatively new practice owner that has a simple IRA, these are going to be rule changes specific to your plan. Or if you're an associate or an employee in a practice that has a simple IRA, these are some things for you to keep in mind. Number one, you can now swap simple IRA plans. You can change simple IRA plans into another retirement plan like a 401k plan during the year, starting in 2024. So before, you had to wait until the next calendar year in order to stop that simple and start a new retirement plan. and you had to meet pretty specific deadlines in terms of getting that process started and notifying employees. So it was pretty rigid. There was a pretty clear towards the end of your deadline to get that started. Now you can do it during the year as long as you are starting a safe harbor 401k plan. So most practices from my knowledge are probably going to be using a safe harbor plan. So as long as you are swapping with a safe harbor 401k plan in 2024 and beyond, you can switch a simple IRA into that new plan in the middle of the year, right? So just keep an eye. One thing you want to keep an eye on if you're doing it mid-year is that you want to keep an eye on contribution limits between two plans. So if you are contributing to one plan, your simple plan, and then to the 401k plan, you want to make sure you're not bumping into the maximum amounts between those two plans, right? So that's just a record-keeping thing to keep an eye on. Number two, simple Roth IRAs and SEP Roth IRAs are available to you starting this year, 2023. So now you have two more opportunities to get those Roth contributions in. You can create both simple Roth IRAs and SEP Roth IRAs, which in the past were only pre-tax contributions. While this technically starts this year, it's going to take some time before your custodian and the IRS and your practice is able to update paperwork and policies and procedures. We still got to wait for the IRS to tell us how we can actually, or how employees can actually elect to do that. So there's still some time to wait, but hopefully it's not too far into the future. Next thing is you can make, as a practice owner, as an employer, you can make additional employer contributions into simple IRA plans starting in 2024. So this is essentially like a profit sharing component to a simple IRA. So in the past, you didn't have this option. All you had was your contributions as an employee, and then you had a certain match formula, right? There's nothing in addition to that you can add to it. Well, now this gives you the opportunity starting in 2024 and beyond to add an additional amount as the practice owner, as the employer. There are limits. So you can add up to the lesser of 10% of employee compensation or $5,000 per employee per year. So if you have any employees that are earning $50,000 or above, that $5,000 is really going to be your limit, right? So it doesn't quite get you to the 401k limits, but it's at least a step there. You can squeeze more out of a simple IRA plan while you're using it. One last thing for the simple IRA is that contribution limits are going to increase for any business that has 25 or fewer employees, right? And that's probably going to be most of you listening here. So if your practice has less than 26 employees, so 25 and under, your contribution limits in a simple IRA plan are going to be increasing by 10% starting in 2024. Now, if you are at an employer that has 26 or more employees, some special rules apply. Basically, they have to increase the matching percentage in order to get this. So that's something to look forward to in 2024 or later. Really, it does add more complexity though in terms of figuring out, okay, how much are my actual contribution limits? You have to take that current year's, multiply it by 10%, add that on. So adds some complexity there, but bumps up the amount you can save. So those are the simple IRA specific rules to follow. Okay, next up is going to be the category of 401k specific rule changes. So things specific to 401k accounts. The first one we'll talk about is employer matches. Effective now, so effective right after the law was passed, employer matching percentages, so any amount that you as a practice owner match to an employee's account or match to employee contributions, can now go into the Roth accounts inside of the 401k, assuming that your 401k allows for it, right? So historically, those matching, or really any employer dollars, whether it's match or profit share or any additional match, those always went into the pre-tax account. Now there's an option to elect for those matching dollars to go into the Roth account, assuming that Roth feature is in your 401k plan. And something to think about, though, is that those dollars, if they're taking that match as a Roth contribution, those dollars are going to be included in the employee's income. It's almost like they did a Roth conversion. It's going to be included in their income for that year. And those Roth dollars can't be subject to a vesting schedule, meaning that if they left your practice the next day, they would be able to take those Roth match dollars with them. Even if you had a vesting schedule in the 401k plan. So it's sort of unclear how exactly this is going to jive with your vesting schedule in the 401k plan already, which is supposed to protect you from employees leaving and taking your dollars with them. So that's something to keep an eye on, but those dollars cannot be subject to a vesting schedule. And it's going to take some time again for this to go through your plan administrators to update plans and to update paperwork and policies and things like that. So that's something that is going to take a little bit of time as well. But talk to your third-party administrator. Talk to the people involved in your plan and say, hey, what do I need to do? Next thing to look at is goodbye sayonara RMDs for Roth 401k accounts. So starting in 2024, Roth 401k accounts, so Roth accounts within your 401k plan, are no longer going to be subject to required minimum distributions once you got to that age. In the past, one major drawback of having Roth accounts inside of your 401k plan was that even though they were Roth dollars, as soon as you hit what used to be age 72, you had to start withdrawing a certain required amount every year out of that account. Now, the dollars were tax-free, assuming you met the rules because it's Roth dollars, but you still had to withdraw funds and start to leak funds out of that account. Fortunately, this has been changed by Congress. Now they are eliminating these required distributions from Roth accounts in 401k plans starting in 2024. And so in the past, this usually led to almost an immediate decision at retirement to roll over the funds out of that 401k plan into that Roth IRA account. But now that's changed. So rollover decisions are going to be just like your other 401k accounts. They're going to be based on cost within the 401k plan. They're going to be based on investment options in the plan versus the probably open investment options in an IRA. Your withdrawal needs if retiring early, and how the 401k plan looks at withdrawal order versus an IRA, and also creditor protections with a 401k account, which is really heavily protected, versus an IRA, which is going to be really determined by your state. Some states will allow you to, if you roll the funds over, to carry that 401k ERISA protection with you into the IRA. Others may not. Check with your state for that. But those are some things you want to think about if you are considering whether you should roll over the funds out of a 401k account into that IRA. Another thing to think about now in a 401k is that starting 2024, you as a practice owner or your employer, if you're an employed OD, can start making matching contributions to employee 401k accounts based on their student loan payments, as if they were contributing to the 401k account, right? So if you had employees that couldn't afford or chose not to contribute into the 401k plan, maybe it was because of student loan payments. If they're making student loan payments, you can put matching dollars into their 401k account up to the usual limits and based on your vesting schedule and all that, based on their student loan payments instead of their 401k contributions. So this is a nice perk to sort of attract and retain some talented team members there. So something cool to think about there. Next up on the 401k side is a couple of rules if you're to really keep in mind if you are 50 or older or getting there. But you'll also want to keep these in mind if you own a practice and you're not 50 or older. So some things to keep in mind here. Number one, there are increased catch-up contributions in your 60s starting in 2025. So in 2025 or later, you'll be able to make higher catch-up contributions if you are specifically ages 60, 61, 62, or 63. So between 60 and 63, you'll have a higher catch-up contribution amount. And for those who are not aware of what they are, catch-up contributions are an additional amount that you can make on top of the regular maximum 401k amount that you can put in as an employee. So the catch-up amount, once you get 50 and above, you can add an additional amount. Specifically, this rule is going to limit the increases to the greater of $10,000 or 150% of the regular catch-up amount in 2024. So a little bit more complication there, but that's going to be a higher amount that you can put into 401k accounts starting in 2025. And you're also going to be able to get a higher catch-up amount if you are in a simple IRA too. So that limit jumps up if you're in a simple IRA to the greater of $5,000 or 150% of 2025's catch-up amount. So that's a nice bump in the amount you can put in there as you are saving towards retirement. Okay, so with that in mind, we now have the next rule, and that is if you are a quote-unquote high-wage earner, you're going to be required to use the Roth account, the Roth option in your 401k account for your catch-up contributions, right? So starting in 2024, if you are age 50 or older and you're making those catch-up contributions, if your prior year's wages were higher than $145,000 or more, you're going to be required to make catch-up contributions to your Roth account in the 401k plan. In the past, you can choose between pre-tax and Roth, and especially with you being in your peak earning years, often that pre-tax account made more sense so you can get that deduction. But now if your wages in the prior year were $145,000 or more, starting next year, 2024, you're going to be required to use that catch-up contribution, and you won't be able to take advantage of that deduction. So this does not apply to IRAs, including simple IRAs, but it's specifically for 401k plans. And there's a couple things to keep in mind here, right? So on the one hand, of course, we just talked about higher catch-up amounts if you're 50 or older. But now you may be required to use that Roth account, so that's something to keep in mind. But specifically, when you look at the language of the law, specifically the law says wages and wages from the employer sponsoring the plan. So it seems that if you change employers, for example, if you change employers mid-year and you have a new employer sponsoring a new plan, you have less than $145,000 between, with each employer, your prior one and your current one, you may be able to get around this requirement, right? So changing employers may be a planning opportunity here. And also, if you are a self-employed optometrist without wages, let's say you are a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, the law specifically says wages. So if you have that and you don't have wages, you can probably get around it. You may be able to sidestep this requirement. So some planning things to keep in mind. And one more thing about this, and this is important for anyone that owns a practice or anyone that's in a practice with a 401k plan, is that not all 401k plans allow for Roth accounts. Not all 401k plans allow for Roth contributions. So the question is, what if you or one of your team members falls under this rule, 50 and older, has a high enough income, and is now required to make their catch-up contributions to a Roth account, but your 401k plan does not have that option? In this situation, it seems from looking at the law that no one in your business, no one in your 401k plan will be able to make catch-up contributions to the plan at all. So this whole new law, this whole Secure Act 2.0, is an opportunity for you to talk with your plan provider, talk with your third-party administrator to make sure that your plan includes the bells and whistles that it needs, or talk to your financial advisor if they review this with you. Even if no one is 50 or older yet, it may likely just make sense to have a fully functional retirement plan that's fully equipped for the future and won't fail down the road, and gives your employees the features, the bells and whistles that they would want. Something to keep in mind there. Next rule change to keep in mind is that sole proprietors now have more time to newly open and fund a solo 401k. So starting this year's contributions, 2023, if you are taxed as a sole proprietor on a Schedule C, so for example, if you are an independent contractor or you have consulting work or a side business, you can now open a solo 401k after the new year and fully funded, including employee and employer contributions, before the April tax deadline, not including extensions. So this again begins with 2023's contributions, which means you would have until next April 2024 to open a new solo 401k account and fund it. And with the first Secure Act back in 2019, any 401k that was only profit sharing, basically like a profit sharing plan or 401k plan with only profit sharing, a retirement plan that was only the employer's dollars going into it, you can actually open that after the new year and do that before the tax filing deadline of the business. And now this is opened up to sole proprietors to open up a solo 401k, and something for you to think about if you're in that situation. As we get to the end, one last thing I'll mention about 401k accounts or just retirement accounts as a whole is that there is now, starting in 2023, there is an increased retirement plan startup credit. So in the past, this credit was limited to 50% of the costs. Of course, there were some other rules to follow here, other limitations, but the credit was limited, tax credit was limited to 50% of the startup costs. Now you can get that tax credit for 100% of those startup costs for a new retirement plan up to the other limits and rules. A nice benefit there if you are thinking about starting a retirement plan this year in your practice, something to look at there. And those are the major points. We talked about, again, 529 accounts. We talked about simple IRA rules. We talked about 401k rules. Those are the major points that optometrists should know about that are currently practicing. And really, we barely even scratched the surface here. For example, required minimum distributions, so that age in which you have to take withdrawals now from pre-tax retirement accounts. It was age 72 in which those started. Now that's been pushed back to age 73, assuming you haven't hit that age yet already. And then later on down the road, age 75. So that gives you more planning room before you have to, your withdrawal to start emptying those accounts. So there's a lot here, and there's a lot more that we haven't yet covered. I think in general, just talk with your professionals and see what applies to you. Hopefully this sparks some ideas or interesting tidbits for your mind, but chat with your financial advisor or with one if you're not working with one already. Like myself, chat with the administrator or the provider on your retirement plan. See exactly what you need to keep in mind for your specific situation. Of course, let me know if you have any questions. You can reach me by email, Evon, E-V-O-N, at optometrywealth.com. You can check out all those resources in my show notes that I mentioned earlier. And I'm working on a full-length blog post as sort of a full guide to all this. So once that's done, take a look at that at my website, and I'll be throwing a link to that in the show notes as well. With that in mind, we can all take a deep breath because that was a detail-heavy episode there, a whole lot jam-packed. I really appreciate listening today. Again, let me know if you have any questions, and we will catch you on the next episode. In the meantime, take care.
Want more resources to help master your money? Check out the Education Hub on Evon's website at optometrywealth.com. Evon Mendrin is a certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, a California registered investment advisor. All opinions of Evon and his guests are their own. This show is for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for specific investment, legal, tax, or other decisions. Clients of OWA may own securities mentioned on this show.